So today, Dr. Losi's presentation will be about some do's and don'ts for ladybugs in the garden. So take it away, Dr. Losi.
Great. And are you seeing the slides?
Yes, looks great.
Good. Thank you, Matt and Amara, for inviting me. This is my favorite topic to talk about is ladybugs and specifically about how we can both nurture them, because some need to be conserved, and how we can make use of the invaluable service that they provide. So here's what I want to talk about. Why insects need gardens, why gardens need insects, and then we'll get into specifically do's and don'ts for attracting and nurturing ladybugs specifically. So why insects need gardens? There's this phrase that's out there, the insect apocalypse, and it's all about this idea that insects, not just ladybugs, but insects in general, are going through this huge decline. And that's obviously not specific to insects in the sense that lots of other groups are declining. You've probably heard about birds. There's problems with bats, frogs in general, but insects are going through a huge decline, both in terms of their diversity and in terms of just their numbers. Here's another way to look at that. This is the decline in selected insect populations, so selected groups of insect across the globe. And the one I'm focusing on is beetles, and you can see that a huge number of beetle populations are declining. And we think that habitat loss is one of the primary causes. So there's other things too. There's global warming, there's pesticides, but habitat loss is really the key factor. So what does that mean for gardens? Gardens can add habitat in general for these declining insects, but more than that, they can be these important stepping stones. So if you think about, there's sort of wilder area out there where there's lots of habitat, prime habitat for many insects, and then there are suburban and urban areas which can often be deserts. We think, oh, it's green, but lawns don't really provide a lot of resources for insects. So gardens, though, we have this opportunity that insects can make their way across these deserts by the little stepping stones if we can provide the resources they need within our gardens. So that was my little intro on why insects need gardens. Now I want to flip to why gardens need insects. And the two groups that we can think about, there's more than two, but two main ones are pollinators and predators. And so pollinators, I think you probably have heard a lot about the pollinators, and they are certainly in decline across the world. And they add a value to agricultural production of over $7 billion annually. And so they are many of the crops that we depend on could not be produced without pollinators. The other side of the coin is predators, and predators play also a key role in agricultural production and food security by limiting the pest populations that would just attack those crops and wipe out many of those crops. And so each year, insect predators cut the damage that insects would do by half. And so the natural control that they provide, we estimated at a worth of over $8 billion annually. So these are major important players in our ag systems and in our gardens. So now drilling down even further, I want to talk about ladybugs specifically. So what are ladybugs? They're insects. I'm an entomologist. These are insects. They're beetles, even though the name is bugs. Sometimes they're called lady beetles. In other countries, they most often call them ladybird beetles. And so you probably recognize this as a lady beetle or ladybug, but what do the other stages look like? Because if we're gonna conserve them, we have to know what they look like in these other stages. So that leads to my first poll question, and that is: this is an adult ladybug, but which of the following is an immature or baby ladybug? And I'll give you three choices: A, B, and C, and you can put these in the chat. Okay, one. So this is A, and so here's the same adult ladybug. Here's a little ladybug. So little ladybugs, maybe they grow up to be big ladybugs. That's option A. Option B is this alien looking alligator thing. Could that be what a baby ladybug looks like? And then option C, here's a baby ladybug. Could that be what we're looking at for what a baby ladybug looks like? I'm seeing a lot of B's. Okay, so the answer is B. C is cuter, you're right. But the answer is B. And in fact, if we look at their life cycle, they're adults, they lay eggs, then those eggs hatch into larvae, they pupate like what you think of for a butterfly, and then they come out as adults again. Okay, so why do I want them in my garden? Beyond pest suppression, is there cause to be concerned about ladybugs? And the answer is yes. So how are they doing in general? That's not an easy question to answer. There's some data, but most of the data from professional entomologists, especially applied entomologists like me, comes mostly around universities and from research farms in agricultural habitats. So that's why we started the Lost Ladybug Project, and it provides a whole nother mode of data, which is data from non-agricultural habitats. And as you can see by all those little yellow lights on the map, a much broader space than just right around universities. And I'll sort of buzz through, as the pollinator people would say, buzz through this part because I want to get to the do's and don'ts. The point is we have our spotters, this is what we call our volunteers on this project, have submitted almost 40,000 images of ladybugs that we've been able to identify from all 50 states, many Canadian provinces, Mexican estados, and we've found all the species, including the rarest ones. So what the conclusion is, Harmonia axaritis, the Asian one, is taking over globally. Over half the ladybugs in the world are Asian ladybugs. That's amazing, unprecedented, not clear what it's going to mean for the future. The blue lines going down show how diversity is declining, diversity of ladybugs. If we look specifically at my favorite ladybug, the 9-spotted ladybug, this is what's happened to it over time. And because of that, it's been declared that it is a specific conservation need in New York, and in Canada, it's been declared an endangered species. Okay, so with that all as sort of rambling preamble, let's get to attracting and nurturing ladybugs. Now, I hope you're all convinced that they play an important role. Gardens can be an important piece of their conservation. And so how do we best do that? So I'm going to go through quickly 5 different options for attracting and nurturing ladybugs. You could buy and release, you could provide shelter, protection, food in 2 different ways. Okay, so I'll start with you could buy and release ladybugs. Ladybugs are big business, $3 million industry in the US every year. And we estimate 3 billion adult ladybugs are sold. I can't go into too much detail on this part, but they overwinter in the Sierra Madres in California in such big numbers that they're collected in these huge bags. This shows back in 1910. And so this is the sort of formations that they form. And so people just go and scoop them up, and so they can sell them really cheaply. So the question is buying and releasing ladybugs a good option? Is that a do or a don't? And I'll give you just a second that so you can either use your reaction as the thumbs up, or this is actually hand raise. It could be a stop, a don't, or just type that in. So you can type in do or don't on release of ladybugs. And I'll give you 1 second to do that. Okay. Boom. Sorry, I should have given people a little, but the point is don't in general. They're proven ineffective. You release them in a garden setting, they're just going to disperse and they're not going to do any good for you in your garden. They could spread pathogens and they could damage the source populations and those habitats. There is a caveat, and there will be for each one. Local ladybugs that are reared or ranched can be very effective, and they can help conservation. And releases of even these convergent ones can be more effective in these high tunnel type of situations. Okay, going really fast now because I'm running a little low on time. How about houses for ladybugs? We know they're very effective for pollinators, and Mary could probably tell you more about that. But do ladybug houses work? Are ladybug houses a do or a don't? Putting ladybug houses in your garden. Look how cute they are. See, there's a little ladybug. This one's shaped like a ladybug. Okay. Give people 1 more second. And boom, don't. Do not do the ladybug houses. Ladybugs don't use houses. They don't use shelters. They could be attractive ornaments. Exception, they do need shelter to overwinter. We're just not exactly sure what the best thing is. I know personally from a research farm, they love shagbark hickory, and we'll do that. It's possible in the future we could give you some guidance on that. Pesticides, no, don't do it. They kill ladybugs. You might have to, if you do have to, try to choose one that has the least impact, and try to spray when not so many ladybugs are out there. I could do a whole talk on this part, but the point is, if you want to preserve ladybugs, best not to use pesticides. How about spraying sugar sources? That works great. They feed on aphid honeydew. There are some on the market. Do or don't on the sprays? Anybody want to posit something? Don't. Not enough evidence that they really work. Exceptions, some show promise. If somebody comes out with a better one, it might be effective. So I'll cut to the chase. What you do want to do is manage the plants that you have and yes, they could attract other pests, especially molds if you're putting out the sugar spray, and some other moth pests would feed on the sugar. So what you want to do is manage the plants. They combine both food and shelter. They also provide floral resources for pollinators. What specific plants should you put? Here is a key thing, that ladybugs and things like syrphids, hoverflies, don't have tongues essentially. And so unlike the bees and the butterflies, they can't feed. Here's just an old story that sort of illustrates this. They can't feed on long necked flowers. They have to be open flowers. And we've found a lot of evidence for that, getting low on time. But both syrphids and ladybugs, good predators, do much better on accessible flowers. What types of plants have those? Especially plants in the carrot family. That's the bottom line. If you forget everything else, plants in the carrot family, we've found a huge number on dill the other day when we were at the one farm where the C9 still managed to keep up a population. Oh, I have more time. Oh, that's cool. So I'll go back and talk about this just a little bit more. The bottom line is that if you look at the how many syrphids are out there, syrphids are interesting because, and I know this is a ladybug talk, but syrphids are interesting because as adults, they're pollinators, and as larvae, they are predators. And so in addition to attracting ladybugs, if you can attract syrphids, you're sort of getting something that's doing double duty. And they both are attracted as adults to the same kind of flowers, things with really shallow blooms, because again, they don't have the kind of tongue that will let them go after most flowers. And the one plant family that essentially all of its flowers are the more shallow kind is the Apiaceae, the carrot family. So things like fennel, dill, are very good for attracting ladybugs. So see, with the ladybug, mixed do okay, open nectar do really well. Concealed nectar, they essentially can't feed on it at all. And I'll just say that we arrived at this data using both surveys of the herb garden on campus and data that was submitted by all our spotters, where we were able to tell what plant was there in addition to the flowers. Okay, so what beetles are native to the US? Yes, you can find a reliable, one place to find a reliable list is on our Lost Ladybug website. And we have all the ones that we found, how many were found, and whether they're invasive or native. So plants in the carrot family, so things like angelica does really well, coriander, fennel, dill, as I mentioned. And when we looked at dill, this has just been a few weeks ago, when we looked at dill, the dill was not flowering and it didn't have any aphids on it, and yet the ladybugs were all over it because they're still attracted. And so you can attract them with the dill, and then if you have some sort of legume or other plant that has aphids on it, then they'll stay there and feed, and so it can be really effective. So plants in the carrot family with the open flowers are great. Plants known to support aphids, that's their favorite food. Milkweeds in the late season are a great source of aphids when they've sort of dried up on a lot of other plants. And they're also good for monarchs. So that's something that I advocate as for a conservation plant for putting in your garden. They're attracted to yellow. So plants with yellow flowers, yellow and shallow, are a good key. We've seen them attracted to things like dandelions and some others. So what do you have to watch out for? What's sort of this is a do, but what are some of the pitfalls? And so one of the things you do need to watch out for is that you want to accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, don't mess with Mr. In Between. And so what that means in this case is when you're planning what plants you're going to put out there to try to attract beneficials, you want to make sure that you're not putting out plants that are going to nurture pests, whether that's insect herbivores or maybe pathogens. Okay, so let's go back to our initial do's and don'ts. So we can, do we want to buy and release ladybugs? I would say no, that's a don't. There's essentially a lot of evidence saying they're ineffective for garden settings. Also, you could be harming the populations at the source, maybe even where you release them by spreading pathogens. Provide shelter in the form of houses, don't do it. Unless you want them as an ornament, and that's fine. Some of them are pretty cute. Provide protection in terms of not spraying pesticides, that's actually a do. But don't use pesticides if you can avoid it. Direct supplements, I don't really recommend those. There could be something better coming down the road. Providing, managing your plants so that you can have more diversity and bring them in, that is really the way. And this slide doesn't really have anything to do with the talk, other than that it showed where part of what we're doing through the Ladybugs in the Garden program is we send out ladybugs that you can release in your garden. And so there was a lot of garden release events where adults and kids went out there. They were releasing and sort of watching where they went. And we are pretty flush with ladybugs right now. So if anyone's interested in maybe doing a release event, let me know, and we may be able to hook you up with some 9-spot ladybug, which is the New York State insect and a rare, very rare ladybug. Okay, that is all I have. I'm happy to do. I think I went 1 minute over, but I'm happy to do questions or.
Yeah, great. Thank you, John. I think there's a lot of really eye-opening information there, and I like your do's and don'ts approach. We'll take the first question as Mary is getting her slides up, and that was, is there a movement to rename the Asian ladybug as renamed the Asian giant hornet to northern giant hornet?
Oh, that's a really good question. I actually don't know the answer to that. I know there's a committee that looks at renaming for the Entomological Society of America. The renaming of the Latin names are set, but would they rename the common name? They recently renamed the gypsy moth to the spongy moth because the egg masses were spongy. I don't know about. I think that generally names that have to do with origin are not being changed. I mean, we still talk about the Colorado potato beetle. Maybe in this, I hadn't heard that about the Asian or the giant hornet. So it's sort of rambling, but the answer is I don't know. But I suspect that may not be high on the list.
Great. Well, thank you, John. I will say that we can put this in the chat. There was a presentation that was sponsored by the IPM program that did talk about the common names revision process. So we can put that video link in the chat. So thank you, John. At this time, we're going to introduce our next speaker for the IPM Minute. And this session takes a quick look at a timely topic and provides some action items that you can take for the weekend. And our speaker for this segment is Dr. Mary Centrella, and she's the director of the Cornell Cooperative Extension Pesticide Safety Education Program, where she's also an educator. Mary provides pesticide safety and use information to a wide variety of audiences and will be speaking to us today about risks associated with pest control home remedies. So take it away, Mary.
Thanks so much, Matt. So I'm just going to dive right in here. If you're searching for pest control, especially on the internet, you've probably seen articles like these telling you how to make do-it-yourself chemical controls or home remedies to control pests. And though the intention of using home remedies is to reduce risk, the truth is that home remedy pesticides can often pose greater risks than store-bought registered pesticides. So let's talk about why. First, I want to debunk some of the myths about home remedies. They are not chemical-free. Everything is made of chemicals. Even this all-natural distilled white vinegar contains acetic acid. Their ingredients can pose risks. So even though the ingredients of home remedies are often familiar to us, that doesn't mean that they are risk-free, right? You wouldn't want to ingest any of these ingredients in large amounts or let them sit on your skin for too long. They are, in fact, pesticides. Any chemical intended to control pests is a pesticide, whether it's a Lysol wipe to control viruses or a do-it-yourself home remedy spray to control garden aphids. So why is it that home remedies can pose greater risk than registered products? Well, home remedies often contain the same ingredient as registered pesticides, but they often lack important safety and use directions. Many home remedy articles, like the one on the left here, suggest using kitchen vinegar to kill weeds. Kitchen vinegar contains acetic acid, which is also the active ingredient in this registered herbicide product on the right, Vinegreen. But because Vinegreen has been registered by the EPA, it was required to undergo extensive environmental and human health risks, and its label language tells you what the risks are and how to avoid exposure. You can see the label of Vinegreen mentions toxicity to birds and fish, and it tells you how to avoid exposing them. And it also directs you to protect yourself by wearing eyewear, long clothing, and gloves. Home remedy articles, in contrast, do not consistently mention the risks. Home remedies most likely have not been evaluated for risks specific to your site or pest. So this home remedy to control Japanese beetle on beans, grapes, and raspberries contains rubbing alcohol, which has only been tested for first aid use on human skin. It has not been tested for the risks associated with applying it to crops, right? And so in fact, you can see the article mentions that the mixture could damage your target crops. On top of the harm it might do to your crop, you might also wonder, well, what would happen to people that eat that crop? With registered pesticides for use on crops, the EPA actually sets a limit or a tolerance to reduce the risk that the crop residues would harm people consuming the crops. Home remedies are just not held to the same standard. Home remedies may not be tested to ensure efficacy the way that they claim to do and the way registered products are. So this article gives you a home remedy mosquito repellent that includes vinegar, isopropyl alcohol, witch hazel, lemon, and coconut oil. There's little evidence that home remedy repellents like these are effective, but you really need to know that your repellent is effective when dealing with something like a mosquito, which can transmit deadly diseases like malaria, dengue, and Zika. And in fact, when the EPA reviews pesticide products for registration, they have a unique additional performance standard for products like these that make public health claims to make sure that they are effective against the pest. Home remedies are not held to the same standard. And finally, home remedies can be dangerous to make. This article contains a recipe for tomato brew, which requires you to cook and handle tomato leaves, even though the authors point out that the leaves are poisonous. In contrast with registered pesticides, you don't have to cook them, and they have label instructions tell you how to reduce risk when you handle and mix them. So we've kind of been hinting at the solution to our IPM problem throughout the talk. To avoid the risks associated with home remedies, use registered pesticides and follow label directions. And you can check if a pesticide is registered by looking for the EPA registration number on the container. You might have to turn the bottle around. In addition, your state may have its own specific registration. In New York, products must be registered by the Department of Environmental Conservation, and you can check their online NICEPAD tool, and I think that's being shared with this talk, to ensure the product is registered in our state. If you are selecting between multiple different registered pesticide products and all else is equal, and I mean like all else, so for example, they are similarly appropriate and effective for your pests, and you can meet the application instructions, you have the proper protective clothing and equipment required. If everything else is the same, then try to choose the product that presents lower risk by comparing the labels. And John talked about this too, right? So you want to look for labels with no signal words or the word caution instead of warning or danger. Look for labels that have fewer environmental hazard warnings for animals like birds, bees, and fish. Buy products in reasonable amounts for your pest control issues so you don't have to store extra pesticide. And then reduce the potential for any off-target exposure by selecting something like an ant bait, say, over an aerosol. So thank you so much for listening, and here are some more resources for you on this topic.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Mary. I think it's also pretty interesting. A lot of people think that home remedies are going to be safer for them and that they're using something that they find in their home, so it must be safe, but it's really about where it's being applied and how it's being applied that makes something safe. So thanks for educating us on this topic. I do want to make one more quick plug for our photo contest. So please consider sharing a photo. You can visit this link. We'll also put the link in the chat. And next month, we will be talking about white grubs in your lawn and flies. Shoe flies don't bother me. So please tune in next month to our First Friday event, and we hope everyone has a great weekend. Thank you.